This is the story of a girl who cried a river and drowned. It's a sad story. This is the TIWAKS podcast, Two Idiots with Approximate Knowledge. Brennan is constantly dealing with my cold opens and knows that he has to prepare himself for the cold close that eventually comes. It will also make no sense. I am one of your hosts, Nathan, and here I have my wonderful badonkadonk blessed co-host.
Brennan, what is there else? What else is there to say, really?
Yeah, we're gonna talk. Well, I mean, there's not a whole lot to talk about just because it is what it is, but it has come to the attention of the world, and this is probably facts that Olivia already knew. But boy, you got junk in the trunk, and that is good on you. Good job. I'm proud of you, son.
Uh, well, thank you. I'm glad. For those listening, we didn't plan this bit. We went live, and he just started saying these things. I don't know how to respond to this.
Like I said, Brennan has to constantly deal with the insanity of my cold opens and just going. So yeah, welcome back, everybody. I know it's been a couple weeks since we were last on. We were last live, but we are back. Better or worse than ever, kind of depending on whether or not we were needed improvement or needed to scale back.
I think we're doing fine.
The little salt bits left over from my peanut butter pretzels, and that's always kind of
What
nice.
is that a bowl?
Yes.
It looked like you were holding up some kind of like glowing white orb.
Alas, poor Yorick, I hardly knew thee. For those of you like tuning in the audio version of this, if we ever figure that out, I have a white bowl in my hand that is opulescent or pearlescent in the light of my camera, so it just looks like I'm holding like a Dragon Ball Z power up in my hand.
I mean, depending on what's in it,
Oh yeah.
be the same thing.
So, as per usual, we rarely have our topics planned out, and eventually we're going to have to hit that point where we do have to plan because we can't just keep winging it. But until such a time comes where we learn that, I am going to introduce some. This is the part of the anime where it's a couple filler episodes, but hopefully they're the good filler episodes that everybody remembers. Like the fake Namek arc in Dragon Ball. Which you wouldn't know because you didn't watch Dragon Ball Z. But you did mention that you've watched some of the abridged series.
I have watched the abridged series. I think I don't think I've gotten through all of it, but I did watch a fair amount, enough to understand the like Goku's son being raised by Piccolo, right, and then them fighting Vegeta and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. For those of you who don't, and like, it's been out for long enough that people may not know about it anymore because its popularity is kind of like come and gone. A group called Team 4-Star, led by and Kaiser Neko was one of them. I don't remember the whole group for that, but they did the Dragon Ball Z abridged parody, which at this point, as a running series, is what, 8 or 9 years old at this point. They kind of hit stop and start and stop and start with a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, it was tricky stuff that they were doing, but they decided they were going to do an abridged parody of Dragon Ball Z. And it started out as just a couple episodes. They were running the Saiyan saga, the original like Raditz invasion, and they kept going with it and kept going with it. It has been riddled with some issues, specifically some copyright issues that kind of went back and forth between them and I don't think it was Funimation. It was one of Funimation's parent companies, I think. But they were eventually given the green light to finish out what they were doing. Team 4-Star was able to go all the way through the Cell Saga and finished out then and there. They had talked a little bit about going into the Majin Buu whole thing, and I think they decided to not go through with it. They decided to kind of create their own dubbing company instead, which I actually thought was a really good idea because at this point they've established themselves as fairly decent voice actors and shown that they can do some pretty quality dubbing. So
they've got a lot of great cast members, and yeah, as you say, like the dubbing's really convincing sometimes.
oh yeah, like don't get me wrong, like Christopher Sabat and the other guy whose name escapes me. I'm so sorry, voice of Goku. Um, uh, I don't remember. I'll probably look it up at some point. But those two voice actors, like, they will always be the voice of Goku and Vegeta. But the guy who does the parody voice for Piccolo and Vegeta, which is also the same person, also Christopher Sabat, their parody voice actor is also very fantastic. But it's kind of funny, like, in the early part of it, it was a lot of like dumb jokes and like, oh yeah, here's the plot as well, because we kind of need to mention that. It definitely dipped into a little bit of the seriousness once the Cell Saga hit. We're like, we should probably like accentuate some of the drama about this, but because they definitely handled like the big
Yeah.
moments with a lot of like almost reverence, which is kind of weird because there's also like it's a parody.
I mean, it's. I think that they go a little bit from. I mean, having seen some of the other parodies that they've done, the abridged series, I think they tend to start out. If you look at the earlier stuff, it is a lot more parody, and it gets a lot closer, I think, as they move on to being truly an abridged version of the anime, and maybe a little sillier, but they stick to those beats. I remember I was mentioning this to you the other day with Hellsing Ultimate Abridged, which they also did. I watched their abridged version, at least that of it, which was out. It's all out now, but I watched what was out, and then I watched the actual anime, and I was like, wow. Uh, for me, at least, the abridged version was like more compelling because the characters were more interesting, in my opinion, and that's completely subjective. But the
One
voice actors, I thought, breathed such life into the characters in the abridged version that I ended up being more invested in the more serious moments later on.
Oh yeah. One of the things I really enjoyed about the abridged version of Dragon Ball, or Dragon Ball Z I should say, is that it's definitely way better paced. That's As an adult, that was one of the hardest things about going back and watching Dragon Ball Z. I had to go back and watch Dragon Ball Z Kai, which is a good, don't know that I would call it the definitive, because I don't think there really is, but it's a good kind of redo, kind of like they did with Full Metal Alchemist and Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, where they cut out a lot of the filler. They did hire a couple new voice actors for some of the different voices. I think there's a different voice actor for Frieza and the child characters like young Gohan and stuff like that. I think those are different voice actors. But Kai does a good job of cutting out some of the fluff, and they sharpen up some of the animation. But even then, it has this issue of pacing. And that's one of my biggest criticisms of DBZ in general. That I didn't really... Well, yeah, I kind of tracked into that even as a kid when I was watching it, knowing, like, we have this running joke that a fight will take, 6 or 7 episodes, because 6 of those episodes is powering up and posturing. There's very little fighting that happens, like actual combat. I guess Dragon Ball Super is... It fixes a lot of those issues. I've watched a couple of the fight scenes from Dragon Ball Super, and there's a lot more energy behind it. I would imagine some of it has to do with better technology for doing more animation, so that helps make it a little more interesting.
I think when you think about pacing in anime, this is gonna sound really weird, but I feel like for the most part, that's one of the reasons I really like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure of all things, because that show is actually pretty well paced. There's a lot of moments like when you talk about the fight scenes in particular in anime, like Dragon Ball Z, where you get those 6, 7 episodes in a row where it's all about this one fight. And it reminds me of something that I heard someone say at one point in reference to film and television criticism, which really stuck with me, which is a fight scene should always serve the same function in a piece of media as a musical number would in a musical. It should tell you something new about the character's motivations or their growth. A piece of media that actually does this really well is Black Sails. It's a really good example, but we're talking about anime. The thing I really like about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, particularly Part 3, I think does this best, the Stardust Crusaders. Almost every encounter that they have, you're learning something new about the one or multiple members of the gang that are engaged in this fight. Because there's a lot of episodes where it's just kind of like one or two of them, and the other ones are just like screwing off doing something else. You generally are learning something about the way they operate. Like my favorite scene in potentially any piece of media is the scene in Part 3 in Stardust Crusaders where Jotaro is playing against Darby and they're gambling. And Nathan, I think I've talked to you about this off stream before. How it's just like that scene tells you everything you need to know about Jotaro, which is he is a stone cold, absolutely poker faced, but he just lays it all on the line. And I really love that kind of storytelling. And I think that's the issue you can run into sometimes with the pacing for those longer, like for those several episode arcs where it's all just about fighting. I think that's you good there.
This is the door just shut, and I'm imagining it's because I have the window open.
Oh yeah,
Wind,
that's
all
that's
that.
always happening to me up here. But I think that's an issue you can run into when you have those multiple episodes of just like fight, 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 fight. We're not really doing anything very cerebral. We're just kind of like powering up. I think that you can run into a little bit of like, okay, like, but when are you gonna fight? But that's just me, I guess. Like, and people enjoy it. It's all a matter of taste.
It's definitely tough because you have a lot of moments in Dragon Ball Z where part of the buildup is important. I think it helps give a little bit of payoff for those incredibly climactic moments, but even then, it's one of the issues that they ran into specifically in some of the later sagas where you have these super climactic attacks and you don't really know which one is going to be the one that finally breaks the plot armor and scores the win. You can kind of make those guesses every now and again because okay, so like back in one of the always like the big moments in any Dragon Ball episode is going to be the beam clash where you have the two like power
Mm-hmm.
beam attacks that like connect and have that push and pull. And I realized like looking back on it, they don't have a lot of those strewn throughout. I definitely remember there being a lot more of them, but for the ones that actually mattered, it's fewer and further between. And there's only two that really, maybe three if you want to get maybe a little creative with how you would define it, but two or three that really matter where there, and you actually got to see this in Dragon Ball Kakarot when you were watching my stream.
Mm-hmm.
There's the clash between the Kamehameha and the Gallic Gun. That is, they handled that really well. And every time I've seen that played out, it always looks really good because it's this big, huge moment where Vegeta's like, I'm just going to kill you and your planet. Like, whatever. I hate you. Die. And Goku is very much of the, well, I can't let that happen. That'd be bad.
Mm-hmm.
There's that one. There's the father-son Kamehameha against between Gohan and Cell that actually does end things. That I remember that being like huge and epic, and going back and watching it did not disappoint me. And then if you want to get technical, it's not a beam clash, but when they finally beat Kid Buu in at the end of Dragon Ball Z with the Spirit Bomb. It's finally the Spirit Bomb kills something. Spoiler alert, they don't kill a goddamn thing with that attack ever.
Uh,
It's like Goku's most powerful attack throughout the entirety of DBZ doesn't kill anybody until the very very end.
yeah.
And I don't know if that's Toriyama's genius or him for like Toriyama is on record saying that there are certain characters in Dragon Ball that did not appear in Dragon Ball Z because he legitimately forgot about them. Which I get.
I
I
mean,
understand.
yeah. I'm just opening the chat in another window really quick while I'm thinking of it.
In some other news, I know Gamescom is going on right now. I haven't heard really any major announcements yet, but then again, I haven't been paying too close attention to it. Nintendo had their side direct yesterday, announcing a bunch of like third-party games, and there's not a lot. I mean, a couple remasters that are coming in, a couple third-party games that are got developed late because the Switch is a different piece of hardware and requires a little more optimization to run well.
Mm.
Um, Not a lot of big titles, and it makes me kind of concerned for the coming year for Nintendo. They came out the gate really strong with games like Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey. Splatoon 2 was a big one, although I'm not a big fan of that franchise on principle. I like my shooters a little more violent. Then I don't know. I'm not a big fan of like big multiplayer combat. It had some great first party or not first party, but like exclusive releases that then later went everywhere. Octopath Traveler was a big one, which I still have not finished, and I don't think I ever will because I don't care for the way it does its storytelling, but I still think it's a fantastic experience. And then the only other big hurrah that it's had has been Fire Emblem Three Houses, which I will openly admit is both my favorite and one of the weaker entries into the franchise in general. Like, I love that game unequivocally, flaws and all, but I know it has flaws. It is definitively the easiest Fire Emblem game I've ever played. And that's coming from somebody who has played Fire Emblem 7 and 8 on an emulator. It is easier than that.
Yeah, I mean, not everything has to be really hard, but it feels like there should be a hard option.
I'm a little worried about touching the hard mode in that game, because when you run into difficulty in the Fire Emblem games, it often boils down to the stats of your characters and everything, or at least the way it is in Three Houses. They used to have, and I'm so mad they took this, or in retrospect, I'm mad they took this out. They had what was called the weapon triangle, and it exists in, as I understand it, pretty much every other Fire Emblem game. I know they removed it before Three Houses, but I don't remember when, and I could be wrong about that. The weapon triangle was you gained what? Plus, you gained a 20% chance to hit, as well as like a +1 on damage, and then your opponent suffers -1 to their ability to deal damage, and suffers like a -20% to hit. The weapon triangle was set up so that any axe wielder would always have the advantage against lance wielders. Lance wielders had the advantage against sword wielders, and sword wielders had an advantage against axe wielders. They did the same with the magic tree, where light beats dark, dark beats elements, and elements beats light. I may have that backwards, but and then outside of that, you had bows, which bows had the inherent like problem of not being able to engage in melee, but did a butt ton of damage to flyers, which was really awesome. They had that triangle set up, and it generally stayed relevant throughout most of the game, and you could have a character that was powerful enough or had good enough stats that they could kind of ignore the weapon triangle to a certain extent. If you had one of the really heavy armored units who leveled their defense really well by chance, you could kind of just put them up in front and they could be at a disadvantage every time and still win because they take like no damage. Or you could have that mage that just snipes people because their magic stats are really high and it doesn't matter. Or that flyer who has just enough health that they can kind of power through whatever problems come their way. They don't need to really worry about it. It felt like
it was nice to have that to engage with.
Yeah, it added an additional layer of strategy, which was good. Without it, the game probably would have felt like a more like stock turn-based strategy game. It would have probably come out as a little bit boring. And having that weapon triangle along with these like super fun sprite animations really helped. They introduced it a little bit with some of the skills you could learn in Three Houses, but there's no disadvantage to just having somebody main one type of weapon and never having to worry about what you're engaging. Which is nice for new players. It was a little disappointing for those of us who are veterans to the series. I heard a
Yeah.
rumor that they're thinking about taking one of the Nintendo 3DS games. I think and Fates and Awakening, and I think there's a third game along with that, and packing it into one game and re-releasing like a remaster for it. And I might actually, if that came out for Switch, I might actually pick that up and play it. I did not care for the DS and 3DS Fire Emblem games.
Hmm. Yeah, you'd know more about that. I never really played any Fire Emblem games. Never was really my scene, although I haven't really tried them.
I think they're worth giving a shot. I think you would enjoy. Uh, I think Fire Emblem 8, whichever one Sacred Stones is, I think is a really good entry to the series for a lot of people. It's the same engine that the first one they released in the United States, which was Fire Emblem 7, has all the same like unit types and stuff like that. I think it's a little bit easier, but not in an insulting way, because there are moments where Fire Emblem 7 is kind of unforgiving.
Hmm.
I don't recommend the GameCube and Wii Fire Emblems. There's Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn. No, I would recommend Path of Radiance, but Radiant Dawn has this insane difficulty spike.
Hmm.
That it's a direct sequel to Path of Radiance. So, like, the plot of Path of Radiance. Here we go. Nathan talks about Fire Emblem again. The plot of Path of Radiance is there's always a war. There's always something going on. Ike and the band of Grail mercenaries, as they're called, they're contracted to protect this princess fleeing from this country. They take her to this other nation to go like be in hiding, but I guess Ike is like, hey, these people are fighting this war not only because they're greedy and evil, but they're also racist, and I cannot abide that. So then he kind of helps reunite and bring they pull together and they fight this this I think it's an empire. It's always an empire. But they fight back, they win, and everything's cool. Path of Radiance picks up literally like 6 months to a year after that. And now it's like the kingdom that they saved is now the occupying force for this empire, or what
Hmm.
have you. So it kind of paints us like, okay, sure, you beat the king that went crazy and started murdering everybody, but now you have these citizens that are kind of getting the shit kicked out of them by this occupation force, and kind of flips it on its head, which seems like a
Right.
cool idea, and it is, except there is a point where you actually have to take this group of misfit children, that is what they are. They're all like 16 and 17. These are children fighting war. You end up, there's a map where you actually have to go up against the Grail mercenaries and all of them. Now remember, these are the dudes that saved the fucking world in the game previous. This is a gang of badasses,
Right.
and you're a gang of children.
And you kick the shit out of them.
No, no. Actually, the map is set up in such a way that you don't actually have to physically engage them. It's just the map eventually runs its turns and it's over. Like, you're just trying to hold the line. But if one of them shows up out of the fog of war and it's like, you know what? You're in range. Time to die. It's that kind of thing.
Ah, I see. That's always kind of interesting when that's done.
It's the first time I think they'd ever really done it in that way. It it was an interesting step. And then when you get to the end game, none of those units that you had, because everybody eventually bands together, and through the power of friendship, we fight the actual evil, which is the church. Spoiler alert for a lot of JRPGs, they often make the church the bad guy. Fun fact.
Spoiler alert for a lot of history.
True.
I
you
mean,
make you make a salient point.
like they don't exactly make it easy to like them for
Yeah.
a lot of the time.
Yeah, history. They did not. There's some good stuff they did, sure, but there's also a lot of like really horrible stuff. But yeah, it's the end game for that. You're like literally going up against like the goddess of order or something like that. And I did not finish Radiant Dawn. I got to that boss fight. I gave it like 9 attempts. I'm like, this is stupid. Who designed this?
Yeah, it's always unfortunate when it's just like this is frustrating in a not entertaining way.
It's not like Dark Souls where it's supposed to be hard and you're supposed to just figure it out because there's a skill component. You're dealing with a
It's
random
not
number generator.
it's not a moment where you're like, okay, I get it. I just need to get good. It's a moment where you're like, that's stupid.
Speaking of getting good, I don't know if you've really seen anything about it, but Mortal Shell came out about a week ago now.
Yeah, I picked that up on I think I picked it up. Well, because it was free on Epic for a second, right?
That was the Total War
Oh,
game.
that was a Remnant. That was a Remnant.
Remnant, which we should at some point boot
I
up.
did pick
I've
that up.
not touched that game yet. But Mortal Shell came out. I've been following it a little bit since it was. I know they'd like been in development for a while, but they kind of did like a soft announce a couple months ago, just to be like, "Hey, we're a 15-person team. We've been working on this game that's a love letter to Dark Souls." I was like, "Dark Souls, you say?" As somebody who's only ever played Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, and Sekiro, sure, let's do this. Um, it's a funny thing. Like, I've had a lot of time with Bloodborne. I haven't finished it. I actually really haven't gotten that far into Bloodborne. I played Sekiro through once, probably 1.5 times. I've played Dark Souls 3 a lot. I've played that game a ton. I had forgotten about the learning curve that those games have. So I'm like booting up Mortal Shell. I'm like, awesome, I'm gonna kick some ass. And I'm already dead. Okay. Yep. This is a familiar feeling. I remember this. It's cool. So the concept, I don't know what the plot is. I don't think I've gotten far enough to even figure that out. And it's, a Dark Souls love letter. So, of course, it's going to be obtuse and gothic. And I'm going to have to read 17,000 obscure item entries to figure out what exactly is going on in the plot. I know. I'm aware. I've done it before. The concept for the gameplay itself is still very much like you have your light attack, you have your heavy attack, you dodge, you can parry. They have a harden mechanic where you harden the shell that you are inhabiting. It turns essentially to stone, and you can use that to reflect, or not reflect, but block pretty much any attack that comes your way. Most enemies will get staggered when they hit you like that, and allows you some free time to follow up. You do not have to be cognizant of like what your animation is before it, because like in some games, if you're attacking, you've committed. In this one, if you're attacking, you can harden mid attack. It's on a cooldown.
Cool.
It's a fairly short cooldown. And I'm getting the feel for the gameplay loop of move in, make your attack, like do your combo, harden when you're about to get hit, combo again, back out. Like that seems to be the loop they want you to engage in.
I do appreciate that because the thing that always pisses me off when I'm playing a game that's fast paced like that is when it commits you to those animations and you can't do anything. That's what's the most frustrating is like you decide to do something, you immediately see it's not a good idea, and you technically would have time, you have the reflexes, you have the ability to push the buttons fast enough to do something instead. But it's like, no, you're doing this now.
Dark Souls 3 is a little bit better about that than I think some of the other ones are, but I have to go back and play him again to really get the feeling for that. I like that harden mechanic. I'm going to get the sense that I'm probably going to get maybe a little tired, because I do feel the gameplay loop settling in. And that may change with some of the different weapons that I can pick up, because they don't have like the insane roster of like 39 different great swords that have slightly different reaches. It's like one two-handed sword, one gigantic claymore. It looks like a giant two-handed long staff mace with a flame tip and a warhammer and dagger. But I have to go find those. There's 4 different shells that you can inhabit. Right now I only have 2 of them. I have the knight, and I don't know what the other dude's deal is. I haven't actually used him enough to figure out what he does. There's a couple different shells. I guess they're they all more or less handle similarly, but the type of playstyle they encourage with their upgrades and things like that, I get the feeling will sort of dictate which one somebody is more likely to play. Because I know there's one that doesn't have a ton of health, but he's got a shitload of stamina, that kind of thing.
Mm.
It is as brutal as I remember the earlier or the middle parts of Dark Souls 3 being. I am still in the starting area right after the like, okay, here's how the game works. Go figure it out. And I'm in that part of the game. It's good. I've died a lot. And I thought about streaming it. I was like, oh, this would be fun. And after I got killed like the 19th time, I'm like, I'm enjoying myself, but this would not be fun to watch because I'm still kind of devolving into the kind of like moments of frustration and rage. Not because it's a rage inducing game, but because I'm still sort of learning how to play.
Right.
And it is a game that is set up to punish you while you learn. And it punishes you harshly so you don't make those mistakes again. And what do?
Make him again?
Listen, my time of learning is over. You can only teach an old dog so many tricks so many times before they just can't learn anymore. That's where I'm at. I don't know if I can learn everything this game has to offer.
I'm not sure I'm not sure you've reached that point.
We'll find out.
But
I just can't learn a new game. I don't know. It's good though. I like the aesthetic of in like my fantasy games. I like that dark gothic eldritch monstrosity, but knowing that you can fight against it, that it's not like that jump scare. It's just that kind of ever foreboding.
you know that is the same reason that I kind of would like to try Subnautica.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I would function in underwater because that's different for me. But I don't know how. That's quite literally uncharted territory for me.
I I was just watching some gameplay and I was like, "Oh yeah, this would be very unsettling for me, but it would probably be fun." Which is always funny because I mean I swam in high school, like I very comfortable in the water, but like there's something about that open water which is just like, I don't know about this. I don't know. I think
It's
the game does a
different.
good job cultivating that as well.
It has a lot of like building and crafting and material gathering and stuff like that in that game, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Somehow, and I know it's because of Minecraft. That whole thing as a subgenre took off hard after Minecraft.
I mean, honestly, yeah, I think that Minecraft kind of showed that that can be a successful game. Honestly,
I think the issue comes in where you have a lot of games that tried to follow suit and maybe didn't nail the formula or tried to shoehorn it into their game.
I definitely feel the shoehorning thing. I think too many games have a crafting system. I think there's a lot of games that have a crafting system that don't need it because they think that every game has to have a crafting system. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any, but like, uh, I don't know, like certain like fighting games and stuff where you're just like, I don't need to be crafting things. Like, imagine if Doom had a crafting system. It's
That
like
would
that.
drive me up the wall. I would be
It's like
so
that's not
mad.
necessary. That's not necessary. It just don't like. Not everything has to be Minecraft. You know. Speaking of Minecraft, I'm not sure if this is something I've talked about on stream before, but the thing about Minecraft that's always astonished me and continues to astonish me is I can't think of a single thing they've added that I didn't think was a good addition. And I obviously that's subjective, but since they were picked up by Microsoft, they were releasing all these updates, and I mean they were before too, of course. But I've loved like everything they've done. I have no desire really to go back and play older versions of Minecraft, and that to me is something that I think is worth celebrating and kind of analyzing. recognizing what is it that they've done. The game is completely, the atmosphere of the world when you spawn in and as you're moving through it and the things that you can do is so different than it was in 2011 or 2010, whenever it was when Minecraft first was released. But I feel like it hasn't, nothing's taken away, you know?
And I think that's important because, like, the curmudgeonly old man in me is very much like, why are they keep it's redstone? What is the chicken generator? God, what is this monster? Like, what is all this? The golems, villagers. What? Here's the thing. Never in any of those updates, as far as I can tell or remember, it doesn't. It adds. It doesn't necessarily change too much, except for like the quality
Right.
of life stuff. There's never a moment where I thought I can't play this game the way I used to. I can't like just sit
Exactly.
down and do my Lego survival simulator game.
I think that is a great deal of why it's so successful, because even though the game world looks different, you can still, nothing feels out of place. And it's still so because nothing is so out of place that it's distracting, you can still play the game like you did in 2011 if you want to.
And that's kind of an important thing. And the fact that they've been able to preserve that for almost 10 years now is fairly incredible.
And then they had that, I mean, the fact that Minecraft has been so, remains such a part of the gaming consciousness, not just as a relic, but as something that's actively played after 10 years is kind of astonishing. And the thing about that for me is, of course, there's many other games that are still played a great deal that are older than that. Age of Empires 2, for example, having their renaissance uh, in the last 5 years, maybe a little bit less, largely because of a couple of very specific personalities on Twitch who have really kept it alive. Um, Age of Empires 2 very much. I haven't seen any numbers for this, but my impression is very much that Age of Empires 2 was released in '97, I think. Had its heyday, pretty much died, and then with like Voobly and User Patch, and then producers like T90 on Twitch, over the last 5 years has kind of come back into the forefront after not being really like widely played. I feel like Minecraft, by contrast, really never stopped being a huge deal. And yes, they've had a recent renaissance in the last, like, I'd say year or so, maybe a little bit more than a year, in terms of a huge influx of content creators and stuff like that, really taking up the mantle of Minecraft as a popular streaming thing. And that's added to its visibility. But I think in terms of player count, it's been pretty high consistently for the last 10 years.
Pretty much. I don't know the numbers exactly, but even now, I know a couple months ago, Markiplier was doing another Minecraft thing, and I know he hasn't really touched that game in at least in the public sphere for quite some time. You have groups like Achievement Hunter in particular still doing Minecraft videos to this day, and it's like I said, the game's been out for almost 10 years, and they have like what 400 episodes or something like that. It's an insane
Mm.
amount.
I mean, I think it comes back to the idea that they keep adding things. And I think that a big part of it is the backwards compatibility nature of it. And then again, like some of it is backwards compatible and some of it isn't. So you can log in with your old world in the new setting, like the new update, and you can get all the quality of life improvements. But if you want to experience the new content, you have to create a new world. And I think that's almost a good thing, because you kind of get the best of both worlds. People who want to just keep playing the game like they've always played it can enjoy the quality of life improvements and still and still be in the latest version without having to worry about redoing all their old stuff. But at the same time, people who want to experience the new content are motivated to experience all of the new things they've added right from the beginning of the game. And I think that increases the replayability. It makes it so that people will want to know, okay, now I'm going to get on Minecraft for one more time and go through the whole thing of punching a tree, getting a stone pickaxe, and going on from there. It doesn't get stale because there's always new things to discover. I don't know. I'm a little bit of a sucker for Minecraft. I feel like this has been true across multiple groups of friends that I've had over the last 10 years. I am always the most into Minecraft. um, Not a bad thing, but like I often find like, if I'm ever in a server, I'm usually the last to leave. And there's nothing wrong with that,
Oh god, no.
but it's just like, and there's nothing wrong with people wanting to, not really being able to keep, not wanting to continue to play Minecraft. Like they're like, I want to build this thing and then I want to be done. Like that's totally cool. But yeah, I really think it's really great that Minecraft has had that kind of staying power, and I think it'd be cool to see more games do that. But at the same time, I think it's also worth acknowledging that not every game has to do that.
That's kind of the thing where, and it's also the question of like updates versus iterations, where Minecraft has had its staying
Right.
power because it had consistent updates. I think of StarCraft 2 in the same way, which actually predates that to a certain extent. StarCraft 2 came out in 2010. I know because I picked it up on release. I've been playing that goddamn game for 10 years. And with the expansions and updates and balancing and stuff like that, they were able to more or less update on it fairly consistently without having to really have to reiterate on it. Where you have Call of Duty and Battlefield, which they've iterated that enough that, let's be real, it's been the same game since Modern Warfare at this point. There hasn't
Yeah.
been. They'll make little changes here and there and little updates, but they're not really going to do a whole lot past that.
I mean, it's the same. People make fun of FIFA for doing the same thing, but it's like that's what people want.
Soccer hasn't changed since it's like
Yeah.
inception. Really, there's not been a huge football has not. They didn't put out the football update of you get to use a fifth leg or something like that. They didn't install the football up like the football 2.0 where you get rocket boots. Like,
Patch notes,
yeah,
2020.
patch notes. Shins are more durable now. Like, what the hell? Sports game. The only thing that a sports game can
Uh,
do at this point is just make the players look more realistic and update the rosters. And they know full well they can get away with doing that with a $60 package, so they're just gonna do it.
yeah. Well, and I think that becomes less ridiculous when you view it as it's a little, why like I feel like that's the same thing as making a sci-fi game and then slapping a Star Wars skin on it. It's like people are fine with buying that because like if you made the same sci-fi game and you just made two different graphics models, like all the game engine, everything's the same, story is the same generic sci-fi story, but you just made a Star Trek and a Star Wars version, I feel like people would be happy to pay for both because they want to be engaged with the fantasy that they want to be engaged with. And with those sports games, having the updated roster is important. They want to feel like they're not. They want to feel like they're engaging with the current atmosphere, the players that they're currently watching grow and develop and idolizing.
Fun fact: the Madden franchise is actually how I learned how football works.
Me too.
I It was 2012, I think, and my roommate Ryan Goff, and we use his name because he's a great guy, or at least at the time. I don't know what Ryan's up to. He could be a serial killer for all I know. But at the time, I was dating this girl. I don't talk about her a lot, and I'm not going to use her name because I actually kind of still hate her for what she did. She cheated on me. It is what it is. You and I have talked about this in our personal life. I'm not
Yeah,
going
we've
to really
talked
go
about
into it. But she was really into football. The Super Bowl was coming up, and Ryan's like, "You gotta know, because you're gonna watch that game, at least some of it, and you owe it to her." I was like, "This was post that," and I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" So we sat down, we played Madden, and he made me understand, and that's how I learned how football worked. I was like, "Oh, this makes total sense now that I'm actually interacting with you." He's like, "I don't. You're such a nerd."
It makes well. I mean, it makes you realize like the people who like to watch football, most of them, like many of them, have either played Madden or played football. Like, I think there are very few people who like to watch football who didn't do either of those things at least some point in their life.
Yes and no.
You
I
know,
mean, like my mother has never played or any form of football, but she enjoys watching the
or
Super Bowl.
they have like a close friend who I don't
Right,
know.
right.
Like at least that's just been my personal experience. Is a lot of the people I know who are like really into football either have a family who's really into it, or themselves played and
But
or played Madden.
it's a funny thing where everybody seems to have that stereotypical story of having the girlfriend who doesn't understand football and it has to be explained to her every time. I'm that girlfriend, as it turns out.
That happened to me too. I remember I dated this girl when I was like 17, and her family was like super into football and all that. And football is weird for me in sports in general because I can get into it, but I'm never gonna be into it enough to care when the game's over. You know, like I've had people multiple times invite me to play fantasy football, like join their fantasy football team, and I'm like, look, that actually sounds like I think I might enjoy that. I do not. I will not watch all the games, and you have to. So like, it's just like I I enjoy watching football with people when it's a big game and everyone's excited, and I understand enough about the game to understand what's happening. It's like I'm not. It's just not. It's not my thing to be like following it through the league because I don't really care enough. You
Yeah,
know.
same. Yeah,
I remember
I could not give less of a crap.
when I played Madden. I was playing with my little cousin, not so little anymore. He's like 18 now. But we were playing Madden, and he was way better than me, of course. And I barely knew how football worked, and I was just like, well, I'm just gonna throw a long pass every time. That's what I'm going to do, and it worked out pretty well. And I think that as a result of that and many other Madden experiences, I always, whenever I'm watching football, there's always a part of my head that's like, yeah, they should always throw the ball. And this is getting into sports, which I know nothing about, but every time I watch, this is not even approximate knowledge. This is just two idiots. But like I, whenever I'm watching football, I'm always like, they make these like you pass the ball off to the big bear of a man who's gonna try to run, and he's immediately crushed by 20 other dudes, and he gets like 3 inches. I'm like, just throw the ball, just try. Well,
Yeah.
then of course the most infamous version of that was because this was I think the year that I was like into football. That's because it was the Seahawks and the infamous. The Seahawks could have won, but they didn't run the ball like 1 foot.
I remember that. I actually did watch that game and I went ape shit watching the TV. I was so goddamn mad.
Even me, so this is coming after, right? The story. Even me, who was like, you should always throw the ball. Even me, I was like, look, you shouldn't have thrown the ball.
I was so mad. I'm like, give it to
Like
Marshawn and he'll just
you have
push
like the
through. He does
best,
it every time.
you have like the best running back in the league, and you're not gonna give him a chance to run like I think it was less than a yard.
Yeah. Yeah, the length of his body. He could have jumped and he would have been fine.
Just fall over.
Yeah,
Like
exactly. I remember being really mad about that.
I was always amazed watching him. I never really watched many other teams than the Seahawks. It was always just amazing for me to watch Marshawn Lynch in his heyday, and he would just be running with like 5 dudes being dragged with their feet still planted in the ground. He's just like, I'm going to move anyway. I'm like,
Yeah.
how do you do that?
Yeah, I remember that shit.
20 strength, I guess. That's what 20 strength looks like. Meanwhile, there's dipshits like me who are DMing and they're like, it doesn't make sense that, it's not that much of a difference. Someone with 20 strength can't do this. And it's like, no, like they really can.
We have Travis, who is a living example of what you can and cannot do with that kind of strength.
It's like, I remember, I'll tell this story in its entirety on stream because I don't think we've talked about it before. But in the game that I'm currently running, that's wrapping up right now, the hand job, as we call it,
I refuse.
it's too late. And I remember that happened because you had to it was like the most throwaway side quest right in the beginning of the game.
Yeah,
but you were like, we're
and
gonna
of
take
course it
down
was
this bandit.
Travis is the one who made the joke.
Yeah. Anyway, but there was this point where the party, including Nathan's character, they were fighting this fleet of like 20 enemy ships. And Travis's character, who is a 7'5" Goliath with 20
I
strength
think he
and
was seven
expertise in
seven
athletics.
four at the time.
He was 7'4" at the time.
Bobby is a
He's
growing boy.
grown. He was like, because they all had water breathing cast on them by Alex's character, the sorcerer, and he was like, "Well, I'm gonna swim over there, and I'm gonna use my crowbar, which gives me advantage on athletics checks, and I have expertise in athletics, and I'm gonna plant my feet on their ship, and I'm gonna use my crowbar to pry boards off of the ship so that it sinks." And I remember sitting there, just being like, "That's stupid, right?" Like almost like metaphorically turning to et to God, like that's stupid, right? That doesn't make sense. But I'm just like turning it over my head. I'm like, I can't think of a reason why that doesn't make
Yeah,
sense.
he's a Goliath. I mean, that's the kind of the crux of that.
Yeah, it's like you're talking about a guy who is a full foot and a half taller than most people, who is, in the theory of the fiction, the maximum amount of strength you can have without magical assistance, and has a crowbar and can breathe underwater. I'm like, I don't see why he shouldn't be able to do that. So they sank pretty much every ship because he could just do that. I remember at the time just being like, oh my god, and it was funny too because Olivia actually brought this up the other day because I was talking about it, and she was like, well, wouldn't even been pulled down when the ship sank by the I forget what it's called, but like when the undertow. Thank you. It's like, yeah, but it wouldn't have mattered.
That's because we had water breathing. It literally
Yeah,
wouldn't
he
have
had water
mattered.
breathing, and the water wasn't that deep. Like I had already established that it was a reef, so it was like only, you know, it wasn't deep enough that he'd be crushed. So it was just like it wouldn't have even mattered.
Yep.
Also, like by the time the ships were sinking, he'd already swum away. It's just that I remember you were relating something similar regarding like a real life version of 20 strength, and it was when you saw Cirque du Soleil, wasn't it? On
I
part of
look
their
at that
tour.
more as like 18 strength, 20 dexterity, but yeah, it's some of the most insane. That was to this day I cannot process what I saw because it does not make sense to me. Well, as it turns out, my dinner is actually here, and I think this will be the first time we've actually kept the podcast close to an hour.
Wow,
But in summation,
imagine.
what are you playing these days? What's occupying your time?
Well, I'm trying to get that 100% run of Doom Eternal. Um, Also, my first run. 100%, getting all the secrets on Ultraviolence, I think.
Which is totally
I don't
doable.
remember. Uh, it's either Ultraviolence or Nightmare. It's one of the two. Playing that. Been playing some Total War Troy. Picked that up when it was free that one day on Epic Games. It's pretty fun. I'm enjoying it. It's one of those games where I'm like, much like Civilization, where I'm like, once I learn how to play, which will not take very long, and really even before I've learned how to play, I only really want to play with other people. No one ever wants to play those games with me, but I always want to play them with other people. What about you? What have you been playing?
I've been playing a lot of StarCraft 2 co-op again recently. They introduced like the Commander Prestige, so I've been doing a lot of that. I think I'm gonna jump into. You've inspired me to jump into Doom Eternal again, but I think I'm just gonna do the master levels for a little bit. I don't know if you watched it, but they dropped their announcement for one of the DLC that. Okay, I'm gonna say it. Hugo Martin, if you're listening to this, you're a bastard. You put two Marauders in a goddamn level and you have to fight them both. You can take that laser axe and fuck yourself with it. You monster. How dare you? How dare you? Preying upon us like that. That's some John Romero sigil shit right there. Like what
Oh my
why?
god.
You're preying on our arrogance like that. How dare
Oh.
you? But yeah, I've been doing that, and then I've been playing a little bit of Mortal Shell. I think I need to touch that game. I need to like find bursts to play it in, but play it regularly. But I can't. I know from my own like sanity, I can't play it for maybe more than an hour and a half, or I'm gonna get like really pissed off. It's really good. I'm really enjoying it, but it definitely like it's tickling that rage part of my brain.
The rage function, yeah.
Yeah, that Sekiro is the one that did that the worst. But that's what I'm up to. But anyway, Brennan, where can people find you?
Well, I'm on Twitter at Brennan Bershu, my full name. Facebook as well, same deal, as well as Instagram. Yeah, that's mostly where I am, and of course, I'll sometimes post on the TIWAKS podcast Twitter. That'd be more likely where I post things related to the podcast.
And you guys can find me at Roby1 Kenobi 91 on Twitter, and just without the 91 on Instagram, where you will either see me shit posting, reposting social justice, or cooking. Yeah. In the meantime, this has been the TIWAKS podcast, and remember to always back up your files in case of, in case two marauders attack, because one was bad enough.